Before we break today, I would like to introduce you to one of the main models of Virginia Satir, which I think you can do a lot with, and also it weaves nicely into the idea of neurological levels. So I start to learn to receive too, and I also start more and more to claim things and start to own them. Because what I realized was what I'm going to introduce to you is something that I guess I learned about the model through Virginia Satir. And then in order for myself to make sense of it, I started to NLP it and Eva it a little bit. So I did create a little exercise around it, so to speak. So we had a conversation, and I guess I created an Eva Iceberg alignment format. So it became, so I guess I put my little signature on it. I didn't develop it. It's actually also something that Virginia didn't develop herself. This is based on Freud's Iceberg model. Freud did introduce the Iceberg model in order to explain that we have only the tip of the iceberg is something on the conscious level that we can see from the outside, that we can really notice, but a lot of the things are happening on the unconscious level, are happening below the waterline. So it's not hers, but since she was originally trained in psychoanalysis, this is the basic, it's the foundation of Freud's Iceberg model. And then she did elaborate a little bit more and then gave it more structure so that you can, I think, really practically work with it. That's something I love about Virginia, that she was really hands-on and gave descriptions that make so much sense, and we can really use them on a very practical level. That's why I chose the model, because it's so much connected also to Robert Dill's logical level alignment, and so that you have two descriptions to work with. And we're also going to do a little demo. So the idea is, and I have it also laid out with my little maps, the idea is that above the waterline, if you think of an iceberg, right, there's this little tip of the iceberg that you can see, and whatever comes out of the iceberg, the tip of it, be above the waterline, is the behavior that you see. You know, maybe you can recall the coping stances that we talked about. So, for instance, when I'm in a stress situation, outside of the water, I might see blame as a coping in stress, or I might see placating as a coping with stress, or maybe super reasonable, and whatever words come with it. Or I might see distraction. I might see that. Or it can also be a congruent behavior. So I'm sharing my words, I'm sharing my feelings, and I'm really congruent. Usually, if we're congruent, there's nothing we really need to do with it. So when we think about a change model or a model to use for creating more awareness, to open choices, it's probably that we want to work with stress coping stances, I'm assuming. So that's what you see on the outside. Then underneath the waterline, you actually have reactive feelings that will trigger a certain behavior. So let's say I'm in a blaming stance. That's what you see from the outside. You didn't save me a seat. You knew I was late. I have a long way to get here, and you knew it's the marathon. You were supposed to save a seat for me, something like that. So what do you think, what could be a reactive feeling? And the choices are angry, numb, fearful.
Placating, the other way around? For the person receiving?
No, I mean, this is actually a personal experience. So when I'm saying you were supposed to save me a seat, why didn't you do that? You knew I was late. So what could be my reactive feeling? Angry. That's right. And the jewelry goes to Ray for angry. Thank you very much. So reactive feeling could be angry. So anger triggers that behavior of, why didn't you save me that seed? Or, whatever comes out. So the next one, and the next level is my perception. So what meaning might I have given to the situation that triggered anger in me? Do you have any ideas? Maybe what interpretation, what was my meaning that I gave to the situation? You don't care about me. Right. You don't care about me. That really makes me angry, and I start to blame. That's exactly what could have happened, and maybe other meanings too. So the interesting part is the perception, the interpretation I'm giving to a certain event does trigger my reactive feeling. A feeling is not just occurring, but it's coming from a self-conversation I have in my personal experience. So it's a really interesting level to look at. And then there's also a level of, which is pretty close by, those are neighbors. Like the perception is also fed by my beliefs, my shoulds, my oughts. People should be more attentive, they should be more caring, or whatever that is. They're my should and ought twins. Usually in the Iceberg model you find those behind each other, but for me they're actually really connected. So I put them a little bit next to each other. So there's my perception, there's my interpretation of the situation, and there are also something that I learned, something that I believe in, my shoulds and my oughts. The world is supposed to be like that. These, by the way, are beliefs that are really coded deeply in us, and a lot of times somebody else has given them to me. Sometimes I haven't even come up with those beliefs. They might have been passed on from generation to generation to generation. You probably know about that too. I guess there's this story about a young couple that fell in love and they got married, and then the husband noticed that his wife did this beautiful dish. He was doing a really beautiful piece of meat, like some roast beef. And he noticed that every time she would do that, she cut it in half and then did it in 2 pots. And so he doesn't know anything about cooking, so he was really, curious about it and really interested. I'm like, I wonder why you have to do that. So he's asking her, and she said, you're supposed to do that. You should always cut it exactly in half and then make it in 2 different pots. Oh, that's interesting. I learned that from my mother, and she learned it from my grandmother. So it's been passed on to generations. So he's very curious. He's very tempted to really find out. So the mother and the grandmother are still alive. So he's going to the grandmother, and he says, I'm really interested. I don't know anything about cooking. And when you do this beautiful piece of meat, the roast beef, I heard that you should always cut it exactly in half and then make it in those 2 little pans or pots. And so the grandmother's laughing. And she said, well, that was a practical reason. We only had this little pot in the house. And when the whole family got together, and we were those 14 people in the house, and I wanted to feed all of them on Sundays and have this really nice meat dish, I had to cut it in half because we only had those smaller pots. Otherwise, I couldn't do the piece of meat. But now they owned a bigger one. And sometimes we get passed on those practical things that made sense another time, but maybe today they need to be updated because now we have a bigger pot and we can do it a different way. So those are really interesting areas. Is that still up to date for me, for my life, for practical reasons? Just to point that out. So when we look at those twins of my perception, the meaning I'm giving to the event, my interpretation, which is actually feeded by my beliefs, by my belief system, which is basically the glue that keeps our map of our identity together. Our beliefs are our glue in our identity map. This is how we get whole together, otherwise we would be in pieces. So that really makes sense. But sometimes the glue needs a little bit of update. Maybe it's an old glue, and sometimes we have invented a different quality of glue, and maybe we can put the pieces together with a different quality of glue, so to speak. So going back to my example, underneath this, we have those, what we call soft feelings, the heart feelings. And those are feelings like shame, feelings of sadness. Those are feelings of maybe I feel unlovable, or I feel rejected. Those are all the ones that feed into like a stress dance. So in that example, when we go back to my first example, what do you think, what feeling could have triggered here?
Rejection, like you weren't thinking of me.
I feel rejected, yeah. I feel rejected, exactly. And maybe my belief here is also people don't care about me. They never cared about me. Maybe that was an example I learned before. Exactly. Or maybe somebody else told me, be aware, people don't care about you. Something like that. Okay, so maybe I feel unlovable. I feel maybe rejected. And then underneath that, we have our yearnings. What is it that I was longing for? What is something I was yearning for in that particular situation? So this is where we get to what's really important for me. It's also, a way of looking at the positive intention. What's my intention? What is it that I'm longing for? What is it that I need? So what could be a yearning? What could be a longing, a need? To be loved. Yeah. I want to be loved. I want to be seen. I want to be connected, maybe. Yeah. One of those things. And it depends on your personal experience. So those are just examples. And then in a particular situation, we have to make sense of them ourselves. And then we have this beautiful space and you can give that, excuse me, my friend. And that you can give many, many names. It can be your essence, it can be your soul, it can be your spirit. Virginia Satir used to talk about the self. Like underneath my yearnings, I only want to be loved, I only want to be connected, I only want to be seen. Underneath that, there's this beautiful space of my sense of self. We talked about the core in the identity matrix. Could also name it the essence or something like that. Here's spirit, self, star, core, essence. Whatever you prefer, give it your appropriate name. So that sense of what's underneath all the yearnings and longings, that the place of I am, which is the deepest internal part in our iceberg. That's without the story. That's who I am without all these beliefs. This is who I am without all these different layers. So what I'm going to do is I would like to walk you, one of you, and then you have a chance to do that also for yourself, walk you through those levels. And then we walk up and see if a stressful situation that you experience maybe with somebody else could change into a new understanding, a new learning. So it's not really a change process, it's much more an awareness process to have a step-by-step understanding about what happened in that situation for me and what are the different levels. And sometimes that will allow us to get new ideas of how to cope with the same situation, maybe different. Does that sound interesting at all? Yeah. I need a little bit of feedback. I'm looking at you. I'm thinking, are you really getting absorbed into your own iceberg, or what's happening for you? Just to check out what's going on for you. Are you already starting to get into your own iceberg? You're already kind of following into it, right? Yeah, it's a trancy process. It's like, I'm just seeing all of you like, I'm hearing sounds, like, oh, it's like your blob going underwater. Is that true? You're kind of going underwater? Okay, great. I just want to know if you're going underwater and you're already kind of getting into the... I love this process. I just think it's one of those really amazing processes that really makes sense to yourself, that you can really use for yourself in order to make sense of the things that are happening for you. It's a personal experience process. So this is not about the other person. She also has a model where it's about the dance between one and another, which we unfortunately will not have the time to do, but maybe you're really curious about, so maybe you can back him that we do another round, maybe another time, and then also bring on the other model. Inside of me, what's my internal personal experience? So it's one of those beautiful examples for subjective experiences inside of yourself. So just so that you know, which perspective am I taking? You're in your first position self, and you're going deep down in the water in your first position self. That's what you do. Down, to the core, and then up. And you completely stay in your own feet. You're not switching positions at all in that process. And so it's deepening, it's strengthening the first position. I think that's really cool too. Okay. Are you still with me? Luca? You're dealing with, yeah. Okay.
So I can actually hear what you're saying.
Excuse me?
Yeah, I couldn't hear.
You couldn't hear me?
No, because it was going downstairs. I just couldn't connect with anything you were saying, so I left the room.
Oh, okay. So you feel a little bit distracted?
Yeah, I just couldn't really. Yeah, it's just too dominant.
Okay.
Dominating the space was downstairs.
That makes sense. Okay. So the question is there anybody interested in going deep down in the water? Just for exploration, and so that we can demo it once and then you have a chance to do it.
I'm happy to do it. I just feel that I did the Matrix. So I don't want to...
I did the Matrix.
Yeah, I did with you guys.
I was thinking maybe somebody who hasn't dived down there yet should maybe dive down. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
I'll do it.
You do it. All right. Let's do it. 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 Okay. Okay. So the way we're gonna lay it out is similar to how I kind of micro demonstrated it. We will. You will pick a situation where you felt that you reacted in a way, and maybe there was somebody else involved in it too, where you felt I did have a reaction more than a response. So maybe there's a stress coping and stress behavior involved in it, and then we would step back so that you have an understanding of all the different layers that brought you to that behavior, so that you have more understanding about all these different elements. And we will go all the way to the self part, to the core, and then have you take that and walk all the way back up again, so that we can update that a little bit, and maybe you have a new idea or new understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, something that came up is just a lot of conflicting things involved with it, and it was almost losing myself, and then it wasn't a reaction to a particular thing, but there was quite a lot of involvement, and that's what that was sort of coming to me when I was looking down at all
Okay.
of those things.
So there's nobody else involved in it, but it's more like
quite
a...
a few people and a huge outcome,
Okay.
a huge life-changing outcome, and then a reaction to that because of the process that went through that. So it was, when I was looking at it, it was almost a process that goes up and down a bit, and it's trying to sort of get the essence of
Okay.
that.
I actually have a practical question from a coaching perspective. I wonder, do you have a preference in sides? Like, where do you feel most supported and guided? Is that this side, or just to check in in terms of which position? Just check in psychogeography.
I'm more aware of you there, and I'm less aware of you here.
Okay. And in terms of guidance for the process, what side would be most comfortable, most helpful for you?
There.
There. Thank you. Thank you for checking it out.
Yeah, I'm more aware of me now.
You can really focus on yourself
Yeah.
here, and that's what we want to do. We want to really give you space for experience for yourself.
Yeah.
So thanks for checking that out. Okay, so did you pick a situation where I did react in a certain way, and maybe one of the stances that come to your mind, and from there we could check out the other levels? So you have a
Yes.
situation,
Yes,
right?
Yes, yes.
Could nail it down to a particular moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's, from that side, just go, and you can pick if you want to step right onto it or next to it, however you like, just to get into the coping behavior first. What was the behavior that you showed in that situation? And maybe you can also look, give a little bit
Okay,
detail
yeah,
on
no,
the
I'd like to
situation.
step on it.
Right.
And I'd like to
Great.
say that it was, placating and
Placating.
distracting.
Okay, so there is a dance between placating and distracting.
Finding something completely separate as a way of coping, and distracting myself, really.
Mm-hmm. So from the outside, what would I see from the outside in that situation? What would be the visible part of the iceberg?
I sort of went off into a different sort of zone. It was a strange behaviour to something really quite dramatic that happened.
Okay.
And people didn't like it, didn't like my response, but it was my way of coping.
Okay. Is there other words that you said? Are there any words that come from this place?
Yeah, I mean, do I say what? I'm quite happy to say what had happened.
Do you share whatever you feel comfortable sharing? And I just want to make sure that you stay with whatever happened there. But
Yeah.
whatever you want to share to the outside, you choose how much.
It's sort of easier to say it rather than maybe not saying it, but a really good friend of mine, an old boyfriend of mine, killed himself, and I was completely disjointed and separate from the whole group of people.
Okay.
And my way of coping with that, not being able to maybe mourn with people that knew him or family, people that I'd grown up with, was to take myself in a kind of a bit of a meditative vigil, and I got a real sense of, and I followed a pathway that nobody understood of me, was to see him in a really happy place.
Mm-hmm.
And it disjointed me and disconnected me from a lot of people, because they got really upset and angry at me saying happy. I felt that he's happy now, he's past
Right.
all the angst and anguish and everything that led to this, and it was really important for me to feel that.
Right. And what was your reaction to that? What was your behavior there?
One of complete sort of calm and just placating, saying it's good now, and it was the opposite, the antithesis to everybody else, and it felt uncomfortable, and I felt more disjointed from it, and the more disjointed, the more placated I became, or
So I'm there, just to make a distinction, there are two things I'm hearing. One is what happened for you, which I'm hearing there you visualize him in a happy place, and there's it sounds like a congruent placating, like a chosen placating, like caring, kind of a caring
Yeah.
place. I'm also hearing that from the outside there were some reactions to you,
Yes.
and you were reacting to those. So the question is, which path would you like to explore? There are two elements to it, and I just want to distinguish that.
The placating, I think. Well, I don't know, the congruency of what I'm doing felt right, but it didn't look like that to other people.
Yeah, that's true.
And then it was, how can you know, I felt a lot of confrontation because of that.
Okay. Okay. So that's a reaction. Do you want to work with that
Yeah,
confrontation?
yeah.
Because it seems there's one element that you're very congruent in yourself, how to cope with that situation yourself personally, and I don't get a sense that there's anything we really need to do with
It
that.
was the reaction to that.
But there's maybe from the outside there's a certain reaction to you, and then in that dance you have a reaction yourself.
Yeah.
And so what would I say to you?
Well, it was almost sort of anger at me.
Okay, I'm really angry. How could
Yeah.
you say that?
Yeah.
Okay. So that would be the outside.
Yeah.
And what's your reaction to that? I'm really angry. How could you ever say that you're happy?
Yeah, just disbelief that I didn't understand that. I just felt a lot of disbelief in that.
Okay. And
Um,
what's your
And the
coping?
balance was, just withdrawing.
So that's withdrawing.
Yeah.
Okay, now we go into a coping behavior. Withdrawing
Withdrawing,
is a way of distracting too. It's like I kind of go
Yeah.
away.
Just withdrawing and going away.
Withdrawing.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there body posture with that? With the withdrawing? Just to allow you to go into what kind of withdrawing?
Yeah, I guess it's folding in and
Folding
yeah,
in. Like that's the immediate response I get when you
Yeah.
share that. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, it's just pulling it in, withdrawing, and feeling. Also covering myself.
Covering
Yeah.
yourself and that. Okay.
Hiding. Yeah.
Hiding. So that's good to know. There is something happens from that outside, which sounds and feels like anger, and then you have this withdrawing reaction to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's from the outside, and then let's step one step back, and get a sense of what feeling did trigger that coping, that behavior of withdrawing. Was that, what reactive feeling is here? Is that angry? Is it
No, fear.
fear?
Fear and loneliness.
So there's fear. She's already going into the softer feelings too. So you already have understanding of the softer feelings, right? So there's fear here. And let's step one more step back and just look at what meaning, what interpretation did you give to this event over there where other people were involved and angry at you? What meaning did you give to it? What was your interpretation?
That I had actually let go too early and I wasn't actually brave enough to, the should and ought is very linked to that. I should have
Yes.
actually spoken up a lot sooner. I should have done a lot of things before. I think that,
Should have done.
yeah, lots of should have dones, and I'd let things get out of control by
Let-
hiding. It's
I let-
kind of a lot going on between, and it's to do with a fear of coming forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I should have done something earlier. I should have voiced that and other meanings that you gave to it. What's an interpretation of the event?
It's the should have and ought to have, and it's just giving meaning to it is like, oh, this is what happens. This is what happens when you don't do what you should.
This is what happens when you don't do what you
or
should
listen
have
to your
done.
instinct. When
Yes.
you overanalyze and pull back and go, oh,
Mhm.
I better not.
This
and
is what
sit
happens.
there getting caught in an internal debate.
Right. Okay. So let's step one step back and get a fresh sense of that soft feeling, of that you said that you felt
Loneliness.
lonely.
and
I felt lonely.
rejection. Yeah.
And I felt lonely in that space, and I felt rejected. And that's true in that space. And let's step one step back and just check out what is the what are you longing for? What is your yearning behind that all?
I just wanted to be accepted.
I just want to be
It
accepted.
had come from something that had been so much being integral and loved and part of something and part of a group.
Mhm.
And then with a miscommunication, it all went tits up basically. And yeah, just feeling totally not connected, and I wanted to be connected.
I really want to be connected, and just allow yourself to settle into this understanding and the longing, the yearning of I only want to be accepted.
Yeah.
I only want to be seen and accepted. And just know that that's what this is all about, to be accepted.
Yeah.
And then take a really good step back where you can tap into the space of your core, that space of your spirit, your pure spirit. And maybe you also have a memory of what body posture was related to the core.
Yeah, that's the first thing that actually came to me.
Yeah.
Was to do that, just
To do that and just, bring that core body posture to you. And it's that sense of self, despite all the experiences, that core sense of you, the pure essence, universal life force that moves through you, beyond you. That universal energy that's given form and shape through you. It's unattached from any experiences, not attached to any of those layers. It's pure energy, and you give it shape and form and breath. And if there's movement to it, you can add that to it. If there is a symbol or an image that adds to it, or a sound, whatever may come to you as representing this pure essence of yours, core. Who am I without my story? And just to notice what happens for you here.
It's a nice space just to leave everything.
It's a really nice
Concentrate on what
space.
you see.
Right. That's like who I am, without
Just totally quiet and clear.
totally quiet and clear. That's wonderful. Can you just be with that and make even more of that space of totally quiet and clear? This is who I am without my story. And whenever you feel ready, you can bring that essence and with that movement into the other spaces, and just kind of check in with your longing in that situation. Just bring the core, the spirit into the space, and just kind of notice any changes, any things that reassure, and move into the soft feelings when you bring your essence to those.
Don't have them.
You don't have them.
No, I don't have. Just stepping back to that. The need doesn't really exist.
Great.
And neither do the soft feelings. It's past. It's like a very strong cleaning process.
It's just a very strong, and let's just update it. Let's just continue to clean it, and just do the check-in till the way up. Let's just move to those two places, all the beliefs and the perceptions, the meaning given to the event, and see and notice and just check in. Any changes, any updates.
The author's changed a bit too. Could have done, but I didn't. So what? It's
Could have done, but I didn't. Let's face it. So it's a reality check. It's good to know.
But it doesn't have a soft feeling impact. It doesn't.
Great. Let's bring that to the next level. Bring your essence, your spirit, your core sense of self into the space of that feeling below the waterline. And just notice how it updates. What do you notice here now?
There's no sort of voices. It's quiet. It's
Quiet.
not.
And then you can bring it to the space of your behavior, your coping, and just settle into that space and bring your essence there, just to notice what happens with your coping here. And you can bring the gesture into the space too if you like to, if that feels right. Or just notice as you bring the energy of the essence, of the spirit, of the core here, back.
The coping doesn't seem so disjointed to me. It was more of my essence than something, and if I keep that with me and stay in that,
Just stay in that.
even if it did distance, it's more me being true to me. So
You being true to you.
if I can take the strength that I got from that, it's not my problem,
Hmm.
it's their problem.
It's not my problem, this is their problem here.
And that's not a coping strategy. It's
It
not
is
a,
not.
It's not a pushing away. But actually, when you really, really get into yourself and your core, you become so connected that the oughts or the things that you've learned aren't the real part of connection. The real part of connection is actually being connected with yourself.
Hmm.
And if you keep that with you, then none of the other stuff matters.
None of the other stuff really matters.
It just becomes stuff. Yeah.
And how do you feel now about that journey?
I was trained that it's actually as easy as that.
Mm.
But if I keep that, the process or the system for saying it seems a bit easy and then going into the analytical,
Mm.
if I stick with that, that all goes quiet.
Yeah. Yeah. And it feels really quiet in the room. I don't know if you notice
The
that too.
analysis goes,
Yeah.
you know, the PhD in
Mm.
mind stuff is gone. It's doesn't matter.
Mm. Is it okay to leave it here?
Yeah.
Great.
And that was really nice to get the self, the core from yesterday. That really kind of strong feeling and being connected to the
Yeah.
to the real
To get that.
bottom.
And bring that learning into the space now.
Yeah.
And to have that. Mm.
Thank
Just
you.
take in all the learnings that you made from this journey, and however you would like to bring this kind of learnings, the understanding about those levels and layers, maybe in other parts of your life.
Mm.
Just kind of take that in.
Oh, it's interesting because I've met people before sometimes and they have this kind of Teflon, and you sort of, you get a little bit mean at me thinking, you know, all right then, you know, it's a bit hippie for you or something, but actually when you really feel it, you totally get that. You realise that it's fine, that's just let your shoulders go and let it be. Yeah, no, it's really nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. Okay. Did you could you follow the steps? I think they're really straightforward. So I would like to encourage you to really try out these different levels of the iceberg model. The way I would like to suggest to do it is in pairs, so that you have somebody that is at your side to help you with the spaces. It's nice to have it done with somebody who's supporting you in the journey. Once you really get that in the muscle, you can actually really easily do it for yourself. So it's a beautiful process that you can really take on for yourself and use in a lot of other spaces too. But it's nice to give away the responsibility, and somebody else is really holding the space and making sure that we keep it step by step. So the way you do it, you lay out this journey. You pick something where you felt I had a reaction rather than a response, and you pick one of those stances. Maybe there was somebody else involved. For the practice, I do recommend that you pick on a scale from 0 to 10, where 10 is a really big issue, something really, really big for exercise, that you pick something that it is in the range of 4 to 5, like kind of in the middle. So like, yeah, that was too bad. Maybe you had a discussion with a friend and you're not so happy about it. So it's hopefully, something to learn from that. And then you take that, lay it out, you take it on. You can go into the stance, whatever that was, to just take it on and go in the particular situation so that you revisit that, you really associate into that. Take the next step back and you feel into what was the reactive feeling that triggered this particular behavior. Reactive feelings are most of the times angry, numb, or fear. Those are usually reactive feelings. That's why I made that example here. And you can also just sense what bubbles up for me. Maybe those words don't make sense for you, and maybe something else bubbles up. And then the next step is about, are there any, what interpretation, what meaning did I give to this particular situation? How did I make sense of it? Because we always tell ourselves a story about what's happening. What's the story that you told yourself, basically? And the story you tell yourself is usually triggered by your beliefs. What are you believing? People are mean. That's one of the perceptions, for instance. You know, people are mean in general. So I should not trust anybody. That's something I might have learned. So just check out those two spaces. And as I guess as we could see in the example, it did obviously make sense for you to have them a little bit next to each other, because there's so much intercoded, there's so much connected, that it's hard to make a distinction. What's my interpretation? What kind of beliefs are feeded into those interpretations? And then the next step is, what are my soft feelings underneath? They bubble up, you know, pretty quickly. Yeah. We just want to use that as a sorting process, but they will come into play probably early. Maybe you find them already here in that space too. And the next step is, what was my longing, what was my yearning in that situation? It's usually the flip side. And then the last step is, and I did make a little bit of I create a little bit more space, so I have a little bit of a bigger step to leave that here and get a sense, what is my core, what is my sense of self, despite all of the story over here? Who am I without that incident? Who am I without the event? Who am I in my core essence? And the only thing what we do is we connect to the core source of ours. Not a particular one, but the main, we resource. We reconnect to our sources, so to speak. And then that, we will bring that back into all these places and just notice what happens for me there and how is it updating the journey, and you're going back into the first area and what happens here.
So we go third person and then straight back to the top, or is it?
You go here, you really elaborate on the sense of self, and you can bring your gesture to that, and then you step back into all these other places. Yes. And that can be also done maybe even a little bit more fluid. Maybe you notice, oh, something really changes here. And just to kind of update, refreshing it. It's refreshing and cleaning it again and updating it and bringing it into the situation back and see, does the situation change? What happens for me there? So that's the exercise. And I think it's a beautiful roadmap. It's a beautiful way of looking at yourself in the most gentle and the most helpful way of a personal experience. I mean, if in a way you could actually look at it, there is almost like a domino effect or a ripple effect that you have from the copings. If I'm in a stress coping, which is involuntary, like we're talking about stress coping, that get triggers by a certain reactive feeling. So because I have that reactive feeling, I act a certain way, whatever that may be. And then behind that, the reactive feeling gets triggered almost like there's a hand behind that. It gets triggered by those beliefs I learned and also the perceptions I have, all these filters, all the meanings that I was giving. And then if we keep this distance, this is actually more of pure soft feelings that we feel inside of us that are a little bit not unrelated, but not as much of a trigger. They are much more true to you in that moment. So once we get here, we really get deeper down to this is what I'm really experiencing without all this learned stuff that comes in. And so we could actually put this a little bit to a distance in my understanding. And then the yearning is something that's really close to you too. And it's also related. This is where we come down to the humankind. Like we all have those feelings. Everybody can relate to those. The descriptions here, they might vary depending on which family I came from, depending on the context I was in, depending on all the different learnings. But this is very humankind. Everybody has those soft feelings, and everybody can relate to those needs and yearnings. So this is much more pure. And then here, this is your unique essence. And so it actually is true. If you're already here, that's all you need to know. And then it's almost like a total reset. Because then you're really in your own shoes, you're really in your own skin, you're really in your own, what's that all about? And then maybe from that space, you have another choice to move forward. This is like an extra, let's say like a universal resource. It's not a specific resource, it's the resource. We're reconnecting to our source. And if we have that, then when we bring that into all the other spaces, there's nothing else I need, really. This upper part, this is where all the confusion goes in. And there's also stuff that I learned and I haven't even chosen to learn. And so that's why. So if I give it an image, it's almost, can I have 3 people maybe? So let's say I'm having this reaction, like you didn't save me a seat, and then you're my feeling. So you would be behind me and kind of push me with, anger. Right. Yes. So you trick. Right. So you kind of like you my reactive feeling. So she's triggering me with her anger that I do this, and then you both are triggering her. So one is the beliefs and one is the perception. So they're kind of pushing her too. So anger becomes anger because of those 2 guys behind her. And I become the behavior because I get pushed from all these different dimensions, right? So you could look at it like this. I'm only doing this because it's a ripple effect. And do you see that? And once I step out of this, out of the chain reaction, and I come into this place, so I'm just going to make more room for this, like, what's the feeling? What's the soft feeling? This is not that much pushing. This is when I get here, this is truly me feeling purely in that moment. What's the feeling? What's the true feeling? And what's the true yearning? What is it that I'm hoping to get? So once I get here, I can actually start with that person over there that I have my interaction to say, I was really hoping for connection. I was really hoping that you would save me a seat. But actually, it's about connection, being connected with you. How can we find a way that we can negotiate for that yearning? So you can bring that into the conversation. And these effects are not needed anymore. Thank you, guys. That looked really nice. Thank you very much. So that's how I look at it. There's this domino effect here, but once we get here, this is more something about me. And here, if I can get to that place, and if I can be with it, I can do something about it, and I can start to negotiate for myself and also voices to others. But usually we get really caught up in those things here, and that's too bad. Make sense?